What's up, guys? I think I got everything hooked up right. Microphone's right there. I can see my face. I can see the chat. So, yeah. I am doing a quick live stream on dialogue mixing plugins. Um, dialogue mixing is kind of something that I think I probably get the most questions about. I'm trying to think of other things that I get a lot of questions about. Dialogue editing, like people, they don't really ask too much about it, which means they either think they understand it or, uh, I would guess that a lot of people don't ask about dialogue editing because it can be seen as kind of boring, but really a good dialogue edit is the first step towards having a good dialogue mix. So don't skimp on that. And I can talk for days about dialogue editing, but it seems like people are more interested in the mixing side, probably because uh, it's kind of closer to the final step, I guess. And dialogue editing can be very tedious. I love it just because you get into like a flow and you take the scene from being this jumbled collection of clips to something that just plays. So let's see who we got in the chat. We got Bernardo. Good morning to you. Zakar, Mike, Otto, Estudio, and Sounds of Stories. So hi to you guys, especially to members. I can see you guys with the little star here. So thank you guys for um, being channel members and supporting the channel. And I'll try to get you guys some more goodies in the next week or two. Um, and yeah, so just I'll show you since I've got a lot of work to do today, so I will give you guys as much time as I can, but let's just look at the dialogue stem. Oh yeah, Bill from the Bay Area. Yee! So this is the short film Family Heirloom. I'm going to use this as much as possible because I made it, so I don't have to get permission from anybody, and I really don't want to get in trouble. Um, you know, I like if you guys saw a session from like a TV show or a film that I'm working on, I probably would never work again. So I got to keep that stuff under wraps, which is why I made this. So dialogue mixing is very personal. Like different mixers have preferences for how they want things laid out and the plugins they use. And I've been super lucky to work with a lot of different dialogue mixers. And when I'm editing for them, I always try to early on ask how they want the tracks laid out, and especially if they want me to not do any processing. I prefer not processing when I'm dialogue editing. I have to process things like clicks, and set noises and stuff, but broadband processing and tonal processing, even, you want to save that for dialogue mixing. And so since we're going to be talking about dialogue mixing plugins, I will kind of go through how the tracks are set up, how they're bussed, and then the different steps of like which order I like to do processes in, keeping in mind that everybody's different and hopefully you find your own way to do the same stuff. We got Maria from Ireland. Awesome. That's the great thing about YouTube is there's people from all over, and that's really why I started this channel, is to share some of this stuff with people all over the world because it's kind of a black art. So, like I said, I've got a little bit of time before I have to start my shift. So here we go. Let's start from the tracks themselves. Just for like a signal flow, I'll show you the mixer page here. So signal flow, I've got routing folders, which, yeah, those show up here. So here's my dialogue aux. Before routing folders, I would just have aux inputs, but routing folders are great because you can expand and contract stuff to make it really easy to navigate your session. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but the sixth reverb is inactive. 6 reverbs, 4 mono reverbs. We've got a slap, a short, a medium, and a long. And these are revibes. I like using the stock stuff as much as possible because that makes sessions easy to move around. And then we've got our dialogue tracks, and I've got 12. Now, here is kind of the first, let me, I think I can move this up because the chat window, yeah, there we go. Some mixers like to have A and B tracks. So you could have 12A, 12B, which would give you 24 dialogue tracks. Some of them want 8. Some of them just want 16. Usually it's in groups of 8, groups of 8 because consoles and control surfaces are set up for 8, 16, 24, 32 faders. So that is a good habit to get into. As far as A and B tracks, meaning, like maybe I'd have this half be A and this half be the B tracks. That is used for checkerboarding scenes, or some mixers like to have the boom edit on 1 through whatever, 6, 8, 12, and then the lavs on 7 through 12 or 8 through 16 or however many tracks. Like basically split the mics, booms on top, lavs on the bottom, but the booms always live on the top 6, 8, or 12 tracks, and then the lavs are always usually cut by character, but you can't really do that because there could be more than 12 characters. But just logically cut on the lower numbered track or higher numbered tracks. It'd be lower in your edit window. And then some mixers like to have boom, lav, lav, and you can see that is how I like to cut stuff. And if I have somebody cutting for me, I like to have the boom and lav pairs checkerboarded, because I like to treat these as a single unit. I'll go in and EQ the lavs separately if they're really not placed well, but generally I'm treating this as a pair instead of, just the lavs and just the boom. But I see the benefit of having the booms on like the top tracks, because then, the booms are probably not going to require as much drastic EQ, and it's easier to balance too if you're having to rely on the lav mics. If you have these in a VCA, the boom VCA, you can just pop it down 6 dB for a really nasty scene where the booms are distant or too noisy, and you can, gently balance it. That, I see the benefit of that. So figure out the way you want to work. But then as far as like plugins and processing, the very first plugin you're going to want on your dialogue tracks is some kind of subtractive EQ. I like to use FabFilter, but you can swap this out for the EQ3 7-band, or if you got waves, you could do a Q10. There's so many different options for EQs to use, and some mixers like to use the Avid channel strip, which that's totally fine too. So figure out what plugin you like for your EQ. You don't have to spend money on extra stuff like FabFilter. You can just use what comes with Pro Tools. But the very first plugin in your chain is generally going to be a subtractive EQ, and that's because by doing a low cut and a high cut, and you can see mine are pretty conservative. I got 80 hertz with a Q of around 1 at 12 dB per octave, and then similar settings up at 18K. So I'm really not taking off very much as far as frequency content. But what this does is it just clears out some of the mud and fizz that is going to the next plugin in your chain. So start with a subtractive EQ. The next thing you're going to want is likely to be some kind of automatable broadband noise reduction. I'm a big fan of Cedar DNS1. Even with all the AI stuff that's come out in different plugins, it's still, to me, the most transparent broadband noise reduction. It is expensive, but if you're doing this full time, it might be worth checking out. They do give, I think, 14-day trials, but you have to like email or call them to get it. So they think very highly of their product, and I would say rightly so. So after broadband noise reduction, you can see I've got a free slot here. This is because maybe I'm going to be pre-mixing for somebody who doesn't have Cedar or doesn't like to use it. So I can easily swap in like Waves WNS or RX voice denoise, or even a C4 or C6 multiband expander. That is a great, I have a video on how to make a poor man's Cedar out of that, which might help some of you guys out if you don't want to spend money on broadband noise reduction. So EQ, then noise reduction, and then the next thing I like to have is a de-esser to deal with any sibilance or harshness. Again, I've got FabFilter, so I like the Pro DS. It has a very transparent sound even when you push it pretty hard. Um, you want to set the threshold to catch where the sibilance is, and then the range is how much the de-esser is going to reduce the sibilance. And then I've got look ahead. I've got it in split band, so I've got a basically a bandpass filter to say here's where the S's are. What I've found is that for male voices, you're going to have to open up the lower end of the frequency, and then for female voices, you might have to increase the top end. But this is all based on individual clips, within a scene. So EQ, then noise reduction, then de-esser, and then the last thing, and you can see all of these are bypassed except for the EQ. But the last thing I'll do is have a track compressor. You could easily swap this out with the Avid channel strip so that you have more of a shaping EQ and compressor built into one plugin. But the reason I have the compressor at the end is because if something is super dynamic, or I have a time crunch and I'm not going to be able to spend the hours on a dialogue predub that I'd like, then I just slap on a compressor at the end of this chain and it'll kind of level things out. You can see the settings are pretty conservative. I've got the threshold at -16, so it's really only going to catch the loud peaks and yelling. The ratio's at a little over 2 to 1. Style's clean, and then the attack and release I have pretty slow. A lot of people like a fast compressor, but what I've found is that if you have a compressor that's too fast, it actually decreases intelligibility, and there's a really good paper written on this. I'll have to find it. But the fast attack kills that, especially for other languages like German, or I mean, even like a lot of African languages like Swahili, or if you're doing maybe there's like an Indian film that you're working on, like a lot of languages, even Spanish, are very percussive, and the consonants are crucial to understanding what the actors are saying. So by having a fast attack, you actually knock those down too fast, and the psychoacoustic effect is that the clarity suffers. You can't understand as well what people are saying. So I like the attack to be 10 to 20 milliseconds. Sometimes I'll do auto release, but generally 150 to 200 milliseconds. Like, I want the compressor to smooth stuff out. I don't want it to be crunching down and then like pumping. And then I have the gain, wet gain set to 0. I'm not doing auto gain. I just want it to knock it down and not boost the signal overall. Like, I just want it to tame the peaks. So that's all I have on my dialogue tracks. And like I said, I really start with just the EQ active, and I listen to it and say, what does this need? Does it need noise reduction? Not everything does. Does it need a de-esser to knock down sibilance? Not everything does. Does it need compression? Maybe not. So that's the insert side of things. Let me just go through the comments real quick. We got Ayo from Uruguay. We got Malaysia. I think Sephiros is going to be probably from Greece. He says FabFilter is nice, but REQ from Wave sounds better. Yeah, use whatever EQ you want. It really doesn't matter. And then Zahir's from Mumbai, Bollywood. So inserts are EQ, noise reduction, de-esser, then compressor. And then sends, I have all my reverb sends here. So I've got a slap, a short, a medium, a long, and then two 5.0 reverbs. Now I'm in trim mode. Let me take it out of trim mode, but these sends are starting at minus infinity. No send. And I only use the reverb if it absolutely needs it. And I find the longer I mix, the less reverb I use. Even Foley. Like I used to just automate the reverb, for like a whole reel on Foley and really listen and like get the room just perfect. And then, mix the Foley and it's like, hey, this sounds like it was recorded in like, room. It's got the right distance on it. And then you add it in with all the other stuff and the clarity of the Foley's gone. So I really start mixing with no reverb, and after I get everything pre-dubbed, I'll go back through and listen and see like, well, maybe this is too close. This needs a little bit of reverb. For dialogue, like in ADR matching, I'll use some, but I don't just do like, here's an interior scene, I'm going to add a short reverb to all the Foley or all the dialogue. It's really just, it's like sparingly used, like a really spicy seasoning, like just enough, and always based on the context of what I'm mixing. Because what happens is you can spend all this time automating your reverbs and sending stuff to the reverbs, and you solo the Foley, and it's like, yep, that sounds just like that room. And then you bring in the backgrounds, you bring in the dialogue, and that reverb just gets sucked out by all the other signal that's coming through. And then it's like, well, why did I spend all this time doing the reverb if the other sounds are just going to suck it up? Well, if you want to hear the reverb, now you have to bring it up like 10 dB, and then you're just adding too much. So I like to do just reverb as needed, and every mixer is different. Some will do like, all kinds of reverb on stuff, and it sounds great, and I think that's awesome. It's cool that we can do things in different ways. So all these tracks, FUTS tracks, I guess I should go over this. So FUTS tracks I have bandpass pretty severely, and then I do use a lot of compression on, I mean, look at that. That is just slammed. And that, like for a phone FUTS, you need to have a lot of compression. Um, Compression is kind of the secret sauce for FUTSes, but you can see I don't have like FUTS box or anything else. What I do with this extra slot sometimes is I will add SansAmp or Rectify. What is it under harmonic? Yeah, SansAmp or Rectify. And that, especially Rectify or Lo-Fi, can give you like a bit crush or bias effect, which is really useful for older FUTSes. But like for just a straight up phone FUTS, which is most of them, EQ and compression, that's all you're going to need. Okay, so that is that. And then these tracks, it's the same for ADR, like the same signal flow. I'll just maybe add some reverb for interior scenes if it's needed. But all these tracks go to the routing folder, which is right here. And what do I have on this routing folder? Very simple. I have an SA2, which is great. It's a McDSP plugin. This is kind of like, it's kind of like a polish, like a really fine grit sandpaper, or like a if you're working with wood, like when you seal the wood with like a polyurethane sealant. It's really only used if, you can see it's bypassed. It's only used if I've mixed the dialogue in a vacuum and then I sit back and listen to it and it's like, well, it's just a little bit harsh and a little bit spiky. So this is like a very smooth, it's not quite a de-esser, it's more like a multi-band compressor, kind of like Soothe would be, but it doesn't cause all the, like, the first version of Soothe gave me a lot of latency, and I didn't really like the sound. It made the dialogue sound kind of rubbery. So I've been using this, and it's just a nice sheen on the dialogue. You don't have to use it though. You can, go back to the unit tracks and deal with harshness on here, but I like it. It's just kind of gives you a little bit of the warmth, because to get warmth you really need to take away high frequencies, and it does that, but not like an EQ. Like it just grabs it when it's within the threshold and will knock it down. So there's that, but that's bypassed. And then I've got a Pro compressor. This threshold is set pretty much the same as the track ones, minus 16. And then 5 dB knee, 11.1 millisecond attack, 186 millisecond release, depth of 10, meaning it's not gonna duck more than 10 dB, and then 4 dB of makeup gain and a ratio of 2.8 to 1. So this is more of like a bus compressor, especially if you're using multiple mics, boom and lav. This will kind of smush them together and give you 4 dB of makeup gain, which is maybe too much for some stuff. So I'll bring that down if it's for theatrical and then put it back up for TV. And then a limiter. The limiter is just set to -2 and -2. So it's just a true peak limiter, and that's it on my bus. Compressor and a limiter, and not in SA2, but it doesn't get used all the time. So that stem gets routed to the 6-track record stem, the downmix bus, and the 6-track print master, meaning the main mix aux. So that way, the dialogue stem is recorded on a 5.1 dialogue stem, it's recorded on a 2.0 dialogue stem, and it's recorded on a 6-track print master stem, all from the same routing folder. So that kind of covers the like busing and plugins and stuff. For reverbs, I'm just using Revibe. I've got like presets here for stuff, and then I use Phoenix Verb. I used to use Phoenix Verb a lot, but it's kind of like depreciated, I guess. So it's just Revibe straight across. I've got what's the other convolution reverb that people like? I've got Altiverb 7, which I know is super old, and then I've got Chameleon and a bunch of other ones, but I mean, you just can't go wrong with Revibe. It's so easy, and it's everywhere, and it comes with Pro Tools, so I'd say learn to use that. You can get really awesome results with it without spending a bunch of extra money. So I've jabbered on for a long time about this. I'd love to take some questions. If you guys have questions about dialogue mixing plugins or this setup or something you don't understand, I'm going to read through real quick and kind of see what people are asking about. Mike Wax says, when you do audio suite processing, do you make new playlists, backup, or do you live life dangerously? Great question. What I like to do, and unfortunately, oh, actually, this dialogue editor did do it. You have these things called extracts, which can be used for many different things. What I do is, when I'm dialogue editing, anything that I process, like the whole clip of, will go right here. Because that way it's in the session. If the mixer's smart and they've got these mix tracks set as field recorder tracks, I'll show you how to do that. You right click and do field recorder guide track. And then they decide that I've over processed this, they should be able to right click and then go to matching field recorder and just swap it out for, you kind of have to pick like the right thing. Nope, not that one. Nope, not that. Oh, that's because the clip gain. Yeah, the clip gain doesn't. But you can switch it to this and then bring the clip gain up. So you can go back that way if you want. If something's been isotoped too much. It does suck that you lose the clip gain. That's kind of stupid, but that should be a preference, really. But if they don't want to do that, they can just go down here and drag this up to replace something, and you can too if you're mixing like that. So I don't like playlists because if you deal with a lot of conforms are where you get a picture change and you have to move stuff around. You have to make sure that the playlists are not only open but selected in your conform, and your project then also gets pretty big and unwieldy in size. So I like extracts because I don't have to worry about making the playlist visible during a conform. They just live down here. I can reference them, and playlists are great for like comping vocals and stuff like that, but in post-production they're not used a ton. So that was a good question. I guess you could say I live life dangerously, but I have a safety mechanism in place. Merrick asks, It is like a de-esser designed especially for dialogue. He's talking about the SA2. It is like a de-esser, but it's a very gentle de-esser. And I would say it doesn't sound great when used as a primary de-esser because it starts to break up and saturate pretty quickly. So I like to use it as like a bus decrispifier, really. And I even have a preset, I think, that, well, maybe not. Yeah, so that's how I use it. Do you have separate workflows? This is Javier. He says, do you have separate workflows for sound editing and mixing? Yes. Sound editing is a completely different process. As far as a template, like a dialogue editing template would have probably these same tracks, but just no plugins on it. You don't edit through plugins. You edit just straight up because you want to hear everything. Bernardo asks, which shortcuts do you use the most when editing and mixing dialogue? Automation ones. Okay. If I analyze my keystrokes, I'll just look at my keyboard. Let me show you guys. I think this is pointed down. You can probably see like which way does this go? Which keys get used the most? Look at that nasty keyboard. Yikes. Spacebar obviously has a lot of wear on it. A, S, D, F, G. I use those a lot. R and T are just like spammed constantly because that's zoom in and zoom out. Put you guys back up here. Don't get motion sick from that. Let's see there. And then we'll bring this back on. So yeah, I think A is A fade in? Yeah, no, A is trim the head. D is trim the tail. And then G, wait, is it F? No, G. Which is fade out? Is it G? No, it's D. D is fade from cursor to the beginning of clip, and then G is the opposite. Fade from the cursor to the end of the clip. So those get a heavy workout. And then I always have RX Connect up. It's usually on a second monitor. You guys can only see one. So turn this little red guy off so it just stays up there. Individual clip by clip. And then I have auto align post up. And then I have, this is for just editing, not mixing. If I have these open when I'm mixing, the dialogue editor did not do a good job. And then I also will have Absentia DX. And so even though this is about mixing, I'll just cover this stuff, I guess, since it was asked. So this aligns the lavs to the boom, or the other way around sometimes. Isotope RX Connect is for cleanup. I don't usually use any of these individual modules. I pretty much send everything to Connect so I can process by time and frequency, not just time. Because all this does, if I select this and process it, it's just a time selection. And I might not want to declick the low frequencies. The clicks might be only high frequencies. So I send them to Connect and then just select the problem and process that. And then Absentia DX I use mostly for airtone generating, which is like fill, flat fill, and then sometimes for Doppler removing. But pretty much everything that is an issue I deal with in RX Advanced using Connect. So that's for dialogue editing. For dialogue mixing, if I do use Audio Suite, then I will use maybe a light pass of Acon set to like -5 or something like that. But I don't really like to use Audio Suite unless I have to, because you know it's like a permanent thing and you can't really go back. So I'll use this for something that sticks out, like if you have one angle that's really noisy, you know, maybe there's like a airplane or something like that in just this one shot, then I'll just just process this, but I don't generally like grab a scene and process it because that's just it's too lazy. You need to go clip by clip and make sure each clip has just the bare minimum that it needs done to it. Yeah, this is Pro Tools. Let's see. Oh, let's see other questions. Oh, and then automation shortcuts. I have a Logitech, I think it's a Logitech keyboard. And so the big one I use is I have my G6 key set for preview on, off and on. You guys can see that. So I preview my automation and then I do option command question mark to write to selection, which is this guy. So those are used like every clip on dialogue mixing and sometimes on sound effects editing too, but generally I'll do that and then I'll go back through and do a fader pass. You can see this was clip gained pretty well, so I didn't have to do too much crazy writing. Here I did, bring up the end of this line. And sometimes you can, a kind of a classy thing to do is duck in between the lines to manually reduce the noise. That can be a really elegant way. That was like the old school way in like the 90s of mixing dialogue, is you just bring the volume down when they're not talking, but then you can hear the noise go whoosh, whoosh, up and down. Okay, so here asked to use clip effects for toning dialogues. My dialogue does not have any clip effects on it. I like to do all that stuff with automation. For sound effects, sure, maybe. But some mixers just throw all that out anyways, so it's really just for auditioning stuff for like the director. If like something's supposed to be coming through a wall, maybe I'll highlight it and throw a low pass on it. But I kind of like to use that stuff for the mix. Let's see. How do you usually brighten up your dialogues with an EQ or harmonic enhancer? If the dialogue is well recorded, it's usually too bright, especially if they're using Senken COS 11s. It can be pretty harsh. So I only brighten it if it really needs it, like if it's off mic or something. But I don't just grab like a whole scene and boost EQ. So all I do for that is on my Pro Q3, I have this red one. This is number 4. This is a high shelf. So I just go like that. Sometimes when you do a high shelf, you have to bring the low pass filter down, or it's too crispy. So, and this can be, brought down to like 2K or whatever. You can do a tilt shift too. And the other thing, it's kind of like I don't know if it's a secret weapon, but you can use a harmonic exciter, excuse me, like the FabFilter, was it Saturn, I think it's called? Yeah. This, I have a preset called the DX Crisper, or I spelled lav wrong. Lac demuffler, it should be lav. But this dialogue crisper, I've had to use for stuff that was really poorly recorded. And you can see like this band has no drive, this band has no drive. The 800 to 2500 has a tiny bit of drive, and then the high frequencies from 2500 up have a lot of drive. And it just brings back some life to the high frequencies. It does add noise though, so you have to be careful with that. Okay, let's go through some more questions here. Ivan asks, is working in location sound a good way into working in post-production sound? I think that's a great career path because you'll understand what happens on set, and you'll also get to pitch your services to current clients. Like if you're on set, you can always ask, do you have somebody for post sound? Because you're right there. They know you, they trust you, you're doing a good job. If you're not doing a good job, they'll say, yeah, we got it covered, and goodbye. But if you are doing a good job, then they'll at least consider you because they've already worked with you. There's a relationship there, and it can be a really nice way to get into post-production sound. But the skills are kind of different. So you'll have to learn a lot. And generally production sound mixers, if they're really good production sound mixers, make great re-recording mixers because they respect the material, they respect the tracks, and they don't do too much to it. Like they know what it sounded like on set, and they're not going to just hammer it with every plugin they got. So yeah, you can do both. Once you get to a certain level, you're gonna have to specialize, at least per client. Like maybe you have post-production clients that are different from production sound clients. Okay, Bernardo Bento says, I've seen a couple mixers on Facebook saying they start cutting dialogue at 12 kilohertz and even sometimes 8 kilohertz. Do you think that's way too aggressive? I think I know some of the guys you're talking about, and gals, and I there's a couple reasons they do that. One is mixers tend to be very experienced, which comes with age. So as you approach your 40s and 50s, you are not going to hear much over 12 kilohertz. And really, if you've been mixing a long time, you're not going to hear much over 8 kilohertz. So the kind of dirty little secret is that uh, the best mixers sometimes have the worst hearing because they've been doing it for so long, but their brain compensates for it. So it doesn't mean like, their hearing loss affects their ability to work, but it does affect their ability to hear high frequencies. So it's kind of a safety thing. I can't hear over 8K, so I'm going to cut the dialogue at 8K, and then they'll say there's nothing useful up there. I would like to show you guys that there is useful stuff up there. Just because they can't hear it doesn't mean it's not there. So this is a lab. This is even a crappy lab. This is a Sennheiser like G2 or G3 with a what is it? Deity W-Lav Pro. So it's not professional level audio equipment. But the sibilance and breathiness go up all the way past 20K. Like this is 22K up here. So if you're cutting it off at 8, then you're leaving all this on the table. Now, having said that, it can sound good to cut everything above 8K. It sounds fine. Some of the best movies my favorite sounding movies, they did that. You can hear the dialogue, and they cut all the lows out, like 100, 125 hertz. There's a roll off. So the dialogue is very thin and constrained compared to what we'd call a modern mix. But it sounds great. So there's not really a rule for your high pass and low pass, but if you cut it off at 8K, you're really leaving a lot of clarity up here, which if you're mixing a movie with a lot of other stuff going on, I don't think that's smart. I think putting the dialogue in this tiny little box and then having, all these big explosions and music that's wide range, then you're hurting the intelligibility, especially for people under 40 or under 50 that can hear that high. So I think it is too aggressive, but I also have heard mixes and even worked on mixes, like taken over a mix where they really cut the dialogue and it sounded awesome. So there's so many different ways to mix, and there's not really like a right way. If cutting the dialogue at 8K is working for them, and obviously they're successful, they've got great careers, and I respect their work, then I say, even though maybe I personally disagree with it, the end result sounds awesome, and who am I to argue with that? Everybody's going to do things their own way. So, and you'll get tons of different opinions on high pass and low pass or where to set it. To me, like 12 to 14 is kind of as low as I'd put it. There's not too much above there. There's a little bit, but like you've got this kind of stuff. This is like a breathy, airy part of a vowel. Actually, it's the air coming out of their mouth, and it can be really useful for that crispness and clarity. And you can see that's from, well, you can't see down here because the chat window, but It's from 6,500 up to about 10K. So I wouldn't cut any lower than, maybe like 12K on this stuff. So yeah. But, that's not to say those mixers are doing it wrong. Like I said, their mixes sound fantastic, so it's working for them. They have reasons for it, and I totally respect that. Just a difference of opinion. Um, I can't find McDSP in my Pro Tool plugins. It's not a stock plugin. You got to buy it. That's like one of the few that I've bought. I think I bought Futzbox too, but I don't use it anymore. What are your favorite sounding movies? Hmm. No Country for Old Men is definitely, I would say, top. Uh, it's hard for me to separate my favorite sounding movies from just my favorite movies. So, Jurassic Park, when I was like, what would I have been? 7, 8 when it came out. My family, I was super into dinosaurs as a kid. My son is super into dinosaurs, and it's just kind of a thing that kids like. They love dinosaurs. So, when I heard that there was a movie coming out about dinosaurs being brought back to life, I bugged my parents, every day before it opened. And I think they set a goal for me like, if you do get this done or you do this chore or whatever, we'll go see it. So it happened. And then when we went to go see it, this would have been in Tucson, Arizona. Tucson has monsoons in the summer. I think it was summertime. And whatever time of year it was, there was a huge thunderstorm that rolled through, and it was quiet during the movie, and I watched it, and it was just such a huge. It was like my first big, theater experience where I saw something and it was just like, whoa, this is like I'm just in this world with the characters, and of course the sound of the dinosaurs is impressive, and Gary Rydstrom did an awesome job with that. But like it was such a great experience, and then the thing that really cemented it in my mind was we walked home from the movie theater and the thunderstorm just broke loose. It was pouring down rain, just like the opening scene in the T-Rex scene where it's like thunder and wind and there's rain pouring down, and we walked home and we were soaked and there was lightning going all around, and it just made the experience so much more impactful to have that walk home from the movie theater. So that like it's hard to separate best sounding from favorite movies for me. So I'll just say like Jurassic Park, No Country for Old Men, obviously Saving Private Ryan. I'm kind of a World War II buff, so for miniseries and Band of Brothers, also just the opening theme to Band of Brothers is such a great like that really slow chorale that they have for the opening of Band of Brothers. I never skip the intro because it's just so beautiful. And then I'm trying to think of more recent ones that are modern. Pulp Fiction is one of my favorite movies, and that's a great example of like, they didn't have, I'm sure they didn't use a lot of labs for that. It's like all boom, and it's all about dialogue and performance. And then another one is Big Lebowski. That's a great movie. And and then Matrix. Matrix is good. The 90s were such a great time for movies that like a lot of my favorites come from that time period. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, Paul says, I love that there's no music in No Country. There's a tiny bit of music. It's very subtle. Uh, yeah. So, any more questions? I'm getting close to an hour streaming, so I'm gonna have to get off here and start my dialogue editing shift at 9. So, let me think of other stuff I can go through with dialogue mixing while I wait for some more questions. Yes, I am a Coen Brothers fan. Definitely. ADR mixing is really about EQ matching. So that is, you just have to train your ear. You end up with some weird EQ shapes when you're ADR mixing, but a lot of it comes in the performance. It's really, really where that stuff happens. For ADR mixing, the general process is, I'll show you that. Sorry, I had the wrong screen set up. Here's the EQ shape for like this ADR line. Generally for ADR, you're band limiting a little bit more. You're doing a low shelf down or a high pass and moving it up, and then the opposite with your low pass or high shelf. Those are always the opposites. And then obviously some kind of band matching. You can use EQ match by iZotope. Sometimes that'll get you close faster, but I like doing it live on the plugins because I can always tweak this if it's not perfect. And you generally have to tweak the stuff that iZotope Dialog Match spits out anyways. And then no reverb on exteriors, but interiors you might add some reverb. Bernardo says, I know this isn't related to dialogue mixing, but when they used to edit mix and reels, we still do edit mix and reels. How do you stitch all the sessions together? That's a really good question. Okay, so what you do to stitch reels together is, you can see I've already printed this mix, but what you do is, or the way I do it, is you print your reel, like reel 1, and then you have to do what's called a pull-up to make sure, hopefully the reel breaks are in a good spot, but a pull-up, you'll actually take these recorded output of reel 1, and then you'll make like a second, let me just do this. I'll duplicate it. And then you route this to your print master record, which mine are all out of order. I'll fix it someday. There we go. Okay, so you would take like the end of reel 1 and you'd paste it. Let's go, well, okay, let's do this mathematically. Let's say there's 2 seconds. Let's just do 4 seconds. We'll do the last 4 seconds of this reel. Okay, so length is 4. So then you would take this and go to 0, 1, 59, 56, 0, 0. And paste it there. And this is routed to your print master. You'd have to do this for the stereo too. You could also do it from the stems. But you route this to your print master, and then where you start recording, like if there's a reverb tail or something like that that you need to get on this reel, you would pull this out more. But that way when you start recording, you'll actually, and really you can only do, it's been a while, so you can only do that because you need the pop. So the pop will go right here. So you'll get the pop, and then you'll get a second or two of the incoming reel. And that way there's no click on the 0 crossing right here. So it leads into the next reel. And you can do this at the end too. So you could do the opposite, like take the first 2 seconds of reel 2 and go to your end of reel 1. And you're basically just printing the, I didn't copy anything, but you're printing on the end or beginning of the file so that where the reels change over, there's a, there's no pop from it being a non-zero crossing. So instead of being silence, you can do silence too. You can have like a half a frame of silence and then your reel transitions will be good. But if you do a pull-up, then the audio won't click because you're including the preceding or following reel in like a second of material that'll overlap the punch point for the reels. So I know that's complicated. The other thing you can do, which I've seen a lot of people do, is work in reels, and then towards the end of the project, when it's time to make a seamless for the DCP, then they'll snug all the reels up. They'll like, you know, basically delete and shuffle everything down so that they create a seamless mix in addition to the reels. So you can do that too. But you want to make sure you have some control over what gets put on the DCP, because if you let a projectionist do it or whoever is doing the finishing, they either won't do a crossfade or the transition point will be a frame off and you'll get a little tick, and you don't want that. So I know that's like a whole technical thing that most people don't have to deal with, but big movies still work in reels. Even independent films work in reels. I prefer it. So yeah, that's it. Do you ever do any MS treatment when working with post? Sometimes with music, I'll do an MS EQ, mid-side EQ, to basically get mids out of the center. So that's something you can do. It works for sound effects too, but it doesn't work as well as volume. Could you touch on clip effects? I did earlier, but I will summarize. I don't use clip effects on dialogue. I do use clip effects on sound effects. You know, if something needs to sound like it's coming through a wall or whatever, it's usually a low pass that I'll use as a clip effect. But it's never like all of them. It's like, hey, this needs to sound through a wall. Like somebody's knocking on the door knocks are too bright. I'll do that. Or inside, outside, traffic backgrounds for inside a car, that kind of stuff. I'd like to know your thoughts on using plugins over samples. I'm not sure I understand, so maybe you could expand on that question. Okay, this is a great question. So, and if any of you want a mix template, I've got this on my website with folder tracks and everything, so you can grab it and it'll get you up and running really fast. So it's basically the same thing. Maybe a couple tracks are different or has more. I think it has more tracks in this. But okay, so how does the LFE send work? So on the sound effects here, even though we're talking about dialogue mixing, I generally won't use the LFE for dialogue mixing. Couple instances I have, like for a God voice or something, but LFE sends in general, what I've got is you know, my mono reverbs, I've got two 5.0 reverbs, and then I've got an LFE send. So you can, for editing and mixing sound effects, have a dedicated LFE track. And all that track is going to do is go right to the LFE channel on your sound effects submaster. The downside of that is then you're reliant on the sound editor to provide the correct LFE material, and they might not. They might have no LFE material for something that you want LFE material for. So then what you have to do is you have to drag the sound effect to the LFE track. But what if you want it both in the LFE and, you know, your LCR or whatever? Now you've got to make a copy of it. So that is way slower than just having a mono send that goes to, in my case, I think I am using low ender, but you can use pro subharmonic or whatever flavor of sub synthesis you want. So that is just set on a mono aux, and all I have to do, if I, you know, don't want to use my control surface, is I can just highlight and bring it up a little bit. You know, and now this is going to go to the LFE bus. That's not, because it's a high frequency sound, but like I think I have, let's put this one there. So let's go into the LFE bus right there. Super easy to do. It's very fast. You can also, you know, like I did option click this send, and I can see what sounds I have sent to the LFE. and there's really not much. There's one here, and I generally like to do a ramp instead of the whole sound. I'll just grab like the top of it. So yeah, that's why I use a bus. It's I get to decide what goes to the LFE, and I'm not just reliant on the sound editor. Okay. Blake says, thank you for your videos from South Africa. Thanks for joining. And huge thanks to all channel members for keeping this channel alive. It's really you guys. Like, pat yourself on the back, because if it wasn't for you, I would probably not still be doing this. I've got enough stuff going on to keep me busy. So I will keep doing my weekly streams as long as I can, and keep getting special stuff for channel members. I gave you guys some sound effects, I think, last week, and I'll come up with something. I'll try to do something special for you guys like every 2 weeks, either free sound effects or free stuff, free templates, or members only Q&A where we can really drill down on some specific stuff. Maybe one more question and then I'll sign off. Master Nelson says, is it doable to do a mix in Fairlight? Yes, totally doable. I've worked in Fairlight. I can do some Fairlight streams and videos if you guys are interested. More people have that because Resolve is free. But it's not as powerful and comfortable for me as Pro Tools. I've been using Pro Tools for 22 years now. So it's like, family right now. Where is the LFE bus outputting to? Right. Good question. So this LFE bus is going to just the LFE channel on the 6-track sound effects aux. So it's just going to the 0.1. That's it. It's going directly to the 0.1 on the sound effects aux, which is this right here. Some mixers use stereo reverbs but keep the panning close to center. Is that a good approach? Yeah, that's fine. That's a great way to do it. Then you can also spread it out if you want. So that's just as good as using a mono reverb. It just uses one more voice if you have to worry about that. So yeah, I think I'm going to sign off for now. Thank you guys for joining. Big thank you to all channel members and anybody who's bought something off my website. So you guys are really a huge motivator for me to keep doing this. And like I said, I'll keep doing it as long as I'm able to. I do have like full-time work right now, so these live streams are going to be probably once a week, and that's probably all I'm going to have time for. But yeah, thank you guys for everything you do for the channel and for watching my videos and sharing them. And it just it warms my heart to have this channel and be able to communicate with you guys and hopefully share some stuff that I know. So if you have any ideas for maybe next week's live stream, just drop a comment either here or on a video, and I will try to tailor the content to what you guys are asking for. Have a great rest of your week, and keep your faders up, keep your dialogue clean, and I'll see you guys on next Tuesday. So take care.